Story 1. The Ozark Encounter. My name is Tyler, and the story I'm about to tell happened to my friend Connor and me back in 2009. It's the creepiest encounter I've ever had in my life, and I think Connor would say the same. We decided to go camping out in the Ozarks. The main idea was to get away from the usual touristy camping spots, soak in nature, just two guys away from society. The plan was to hike out on a couple of trails, and then at some point in our hike, veer off deep into the woods without getting lost. And that's exactly what we did. A couple of hours into our hike, we started walking in deep. I would say probably a third of a mile in, we saw what looked like a rickety old shack through the trees in the distance off to our right. Connor, the adventurer, wanted to check it out, but I wasn't so sure. The shack, from where we stood, seemed very off-putting to me. It looked like there was stuff hanging from the trees, too, but curiosity got the better of us, and we crept closer. Here's where it gets creepy. Surrounding the shack, in the trees, were at least 3 dozen dolls. Baby dolls. Dirty, disgusting, lifeless eyes, and terrifyingly creepy. The shack, though beat up and decrepit, looked livable. Both of us immediately got the creeps and decided it was time to go. We turned around to bolt, and when we did, there was an old man standing there just staring at us. He was probably in his late 50s or early 60s, with a beard, ragged clothes, and disgustingly dirty. His eyes were just locked onto us. My heart was pounding so hard that I thought he could hear it. Finally he said, "Why are you on my property?" His voice was calm, but had an underlying coldness that gave me the shivers. "We're so sorry, sir," Connor said. His voice was shaking a little bit. "We were just hiking and got curious. We didn't think anyone lived here." The man just stood there for a minute. Finally his eyes broke off of us and he looked over at the dolls. "What do you think of my dolls?" he asked. I exchanged a nervous look over at Connor. They're unique," I said to him. He looked back over at us, again with that locking, piercing gaze. "I'm always adding new ones to my collection," he said. Neither of us dared to speak. We were both literally paralyzed. After what felt like an eternity, he finally said, "Well, you boys best move along. Enjoy your trip. But be careful. There are a lot of weirdos out here." Our hearts were beating out of our chests. We managed a weak laugh and practically ran from there. I took a glance back as we were leaving, and the man just continued to stare at us. We hiked what felt like miles before setting up camp. Connor tried to brush off our encounter, saying we probably just met a lonely old man, and the dolls might be some weird hobby. I wanted to believe that, but I didn't. I didn't even want to camp anymore, but we were out in the middle of nowhere and the sun was fading quick. We set up camp, built a small fire, and got a bite to eat. As the hours ticked away, we both finally succumbed to exhaustion and decided to turn in for the night. We put the fire out, climbed into our tents, and fell off to sleep. The night was mostly uneventful. Other than the normal sounds of the forest, neither of us heard anything out of the ordinary. In the morning, though, I was jolted awake by Connor losing his mind. "Tyler, get up! Get out here, man!" I threw the blankets off of me and jumped up. As I unzipped my tent, I saw them. 2 dolls, laying on the ground, one just outside the entrance to each of our tents. Honestly, my first thought was that it was a joke. "Did you put these here?" I asked Tyler, thinking he may have grabbed them and put them in his bag when we were at the shack yesterday, and I wasn't looking. "Hell no, I didn't!" he exclaimed. I could tell by the fear in his eyes that he was being serious. Needless to say, we packed up and got the hell out of there. Our trip was done, and we weren't going back. We left the dolls behind and quickly made our exit. On the way back, we took a different route, stopping every now and then to scan the woods to make sure we weren't being followed. We were that terrified. As I look back now, I think the 2 dolls were a warning. The old man was telling us to never come back there again. If that was the message, I can assure you, it was received loud and clear. Story 2. The Mysterious Tent. The following is a story that happened to me and my friends about 4 years ago. My friends Alex and Chris and I headed to a remote part of the Sierra Nevada to go camping and fishing. We had been in this spot before and very much enjoyed it, so we decided to go back and make a weekend of it. Well, I wouldn't be telling this story if something incredibly creepy didn't happen. We had trekked deep into the forest to our spot. We loved it because we would be far from anybody else. Just the three of us, and the serene beauty of nature, that type of thing, you know? On the second day, we set out to go fishing. All was well. We traveled up the river some and had a blast. A few hours before sunset, we decided that we should get back so that we could get a fire going before dark. When we got back to the campsite, we noticed that there was another tent oddly close to ours. Uncomfortably close, maybe 75 to 80 feet away. It was a plain old tent, with no other camping equipment in sight. Our first impressions were ones of annoyance. We were out in the middle of nowhere, and of all the places that someone could throw up a tent, they do it here, right next to ours. Out of courtesy, though, we approached the tent, calling out a greeting. No response. We called again, and again, nothing. It appeared that no one was there. Finally, Chris came across and said that he was going to take a look inside. "Best not," I said. But before I could even finish, he was making his way over. He walked over, slowly and cautiously. When he reached the door, he slowly unzipped it. "What do you see?" Alex asked. "Nothing," Chris replied. "What do you mean?" I said. "I mean, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing inside." We were all confused, but assumed the occupant was out exploring or something, so we went about our day, trying to shrug off the unease. It got darker and darker and darker. As we went about our business, we kept making glances over at the tent, expecting someone to show up at some point. We had gotten lost in our own affairs when out of nowhere, a light flicked on from the inside of the tent. Inside was the silhouette of a single person that we could see. We all looked at each other. Nobody ever saw anybody walk over and into the tent. At this point, the creepiness was off the charts. We didn't expect for things to get any creepier, but they did. "Go say something," Chris said to me. "What do you want me to say?" I asked. "I don't know," he said. "Anything." I hesitated but finally gave in. I walked over slowly, watching the silhouette the entire time. It was motionless, just sitting there in the middle of the tent doing nothing. I got closer and closer. My heart was pounding out of my chest. When I got within about 15 feet, just as I was about to speak up, I could see the head of this person, or whatever it was, begin to turn slowly, like it was looking over in my direction. I looked back at the guys, and they were motioning for me to continue. I turned back towards the tent, and just as I was about to speak out, a blood-curdling scream came from within the tent. Before I could even realize it, I had turned and was running back towards the guys. We were all in a panic at this point. What just happened? Who was this person? What in the hell is going on? We argued amongst ourselves, frantically trying to decide what to do. As we did, I reached into my pocket to grab my phone. 0 reception. Not even a single bar. It was the dead of night now. We were out in the middle of nowhere, had no cell phone reception, and there was a mysterious tent 75 feet away from us with an unknown occupant that had let out a scream like none of us had ever heard before. We were absolutely terrified. As we argued about what to do, there was motion from within the tent. The silhouette appeared to be looking in our direction still, though it was difficult to tell. It said nothing. Then, after a few seconds, it looked like this person was raising their arm up to the top of the tent. We were all wide-eyed, locked into the motion coming from within the tent. And then, out of nowhere, the light inside the tent went out. "What in the hell? What in the hell?" we were all saying to each other. Questions were flying, but we had no answers. None of us knew what to do. We had gear and supplies and tents everywhere, and we were miles from our vehicle. We went back and forth trying to figure out what to do. Finally, we decided that we would go ahead and stay the night, and wait until daylight to try to make sense out of everything. From there, we would just leave altogether, if the unknown person had not yet made contact with us. However, we would take shifts with one of us staying awake to watch over the creepy visitor. "Keep the fire going," I said. The other two agreed. Alex was first up. At around 1 a.m., Alex woke up Chris. As they told me, they switched shifts with no new events taking place. As far as they knew, the weird person was still in the tent. Surprisingly, I managed to get some sleep. It wasn't enough, though. Chris woke me up at 4 a.m., and I was to take over until daylight. As Alex crawled into his tent, I threw more wood on the fire. I remember sitting there, wide awake at first. The fire was nice. It provided some comfort in contrast to our unknown visitor. I remember watching the tent for any movement. Nothing. I would watch the fire for a little while, and then look over at the tent. I did this over and over and over. I remember getting more and more tired. After about an hour or so, I was struggling to stay awake. I would doze off, just to catch myself, and then doze off again. Finally, fatigue won over, and I fell asleep. The next thing I remember is that it was daylight and Chris was shaking me. "Wake up, what the hell?" he said. "Where did the person go?" I looked over to the mysterious tent. There was nothing. It was gone. "You fell asleep?" Chris said in somewhat of an annoyed voice. At this point, Alex was making his way out of his tent. "Where'd they go?" he said. "I don't know," I replied. "We searched for any sign of the person. There was nothing, not even footprints. It was like they were never there in the first place. At this point, we had enough." It was daylight now, so we began to pack our things. We weren't going to wait around to see if the person returned. We were exhausted when we arrived back home. It was a trip that we will never forget. To this day, we have no idea who the person was, or what their intentions were. Was it some sick prank? Was someone trying to scare us off of the spot for good? Unfortunately, we may never know. We never went back to that spot again. It's a shame. It was one of our favorites. But I guess the fear of the unknown visitor was enough to keep us away for good. Story 3. The Dark Night at Cline Falls. The following is an account told by one of the survivors to my mother and passed on to me. It is a terrifying true story, not one for those who frighten easily. In the warmth of summer in 1977, two youthful spirits with dreams as expansive as the open road embarked on a journey unlike any other. Their mission was simple: traverse the transcontinental expanse of America on their bicycles, breathing in every story, every landmark, every whispered legend of the places they visited. The winding roads took them to the picturesque town of Cline Falls, Oregon, a place that promised serenity and the gentle music of cascading water. The riverside beckoned them. Setting up their tent amidst the soft grass, with the river's gentle ripples as their lullaby, the two friends indulged in tales of their adventures so far. The golden hues of the setting sun dappled the water, creating an almost ethereal glow. The world felt right, and the night promised nothing but restful dreams. But as they say, darkness often lurks where it's least expected. Their peaceful slumber was abruptly ruptured by a sound that neither would ever forget, a mix of grinding metal and the violent churn of tires against soft earth. Before either could react, the crushing weight of a speeding truck bore down upon their tent, rendering them trapped and gasping for breath beneath its oppressive frame. The world outside was a cacophony of muted sounds. Their hearts raced, their minds struggled to process the nightmare unfolding around them, and then a new horror emerged. The truck's door creaked ominously. Heavy footsteps, deliberate and menacing, drew closer. The dim silhouette of a man clutching an axe became visible, moonlight glinting off the blade's polished surface. What followed was a dance of terror. The man attacked with a ferocity that seemed inhuman. Each strike of the axe was a message of malevolence, a testament to the depths of human cruelty. The women, trapped and defenseless, could do little more than hope and pray for an end to the ordeal. But as quickly as the onslaught began, it ceased. Leaving behind an eerie silence, the attacker retreated, leaving the campsite a grotesque tableau of shattered hopes and physical devastation. Yet amidst the carnage, a glimmer of the human spirit's resilience shone through. Though injured and in shock, one of the two women, drawing on reserves of strength she didn't know she had, managed to free herself from the wreckage. Every step was an agony, but she was propelled by a single thought: to find help. She stumbled and staggered toward the main road, her silhouette painted in moonlight, blood, and sheer determination. A glint of hope arrived in the form of approaching headlights. A family, returning from a late-night excursion, pulled over, their faces a mix of shock and concern as they took in Sarah's disheveled appearance. Upon hearing her harrowing tale, they acted swiftly, deciding to accompany her back to the campsite and help her friend. But fate had one more twist in store. As the group neared the campsite, the roar of an all-too-familiar engine pierced the night. The very truck, the instrument of their earlier torment, was back. Its headlights, like malevolent eyes, bore down upon them. The air grew thick with tension as the attacker seemed to evaluate his odds. But the sight of the family in their car, and possibly the fear of being outnumbered or identified, prompted a change of heart. With a deafening roar and a spray of gravel, he sped away, disappearing once more into the shadows from which he had emerged. The subsequent days were an intense blend of physical healing, police inquiries, and media attention. Their story of survival against overwhelming odds captured the nation's heart. But for all the attention, one question remained unanswered. Who was the man behind the wheel that night? Though theories abounded, from jilted lovers to transients with dark pasts, the identity of the malevolent attacker remained an enigma, a dark blot on Cline Falls history. Years have passed since that fateful night, but the legacy of that experience remains. The women, bonded by trauma and survival, went on to lead lives defined not by their victimhood, but by their resilience and unwavering spirit. Their tale stands as a testament to human endurance, the ability to rise from the ashes, and the ever-present hope that even in the darkest times, dawn awaits. Thanks for tuning in to another episode from the Alley of Nightmares. If you enjoyed the video, please like it, subscribe, and share with all your friends. Until next time,